A tale of forbidden resurrection. In a forgotten village, far from the eyes of the world, lived Anton, a reclusive doll maker known for his extraordinary creations. His shop, perched on a lonely hill, was said to craft dolls so lifelike they seemed to hold a breath of the departed. The grieving would come, handing him photos and belongings of their lost loved ones, and Anton would shape a doll in their image, silent, still, and forever unchanging. But Anton harbored a secret. His mentor, Heinrich, had once possessed a book, an ancient, forbidden text bound in tattered cloth, full of dark magic. This patchwork grimoire, as it was called, contained rituals to bring the dead back to life, not as human beings, but as living dolls. Heinrich had warned Anton never to use the book, for he himself had suffered the terrible consequences of its power. He had once brought back his beloved wife, but she returned not as the woman he loved, but as a monstrous shell, soulless and violent. In the end, Heinrich was forced to destroy her once more, this time forever. Heinrich locked the book away, passing down his warning to Anton: create your dolls, but never breathe life into them, it only brings sorrow. For years, Anton followed his master's advice, until the day his lover, Lucas, died in a tragic accident. Devastated, Anton's grief clouded his judgment. Desperate to see Lucas again, he rushed to Heinrich's old workshop, now abandoned, and pried open the drawer that contained the patchwork grimoire. Ignoring the ominous warnings etched into its pages, Anton followed the ritual to bring Lucas back. He worked feverishly through the night, stitching together a doll from wood and porcelain, using remnants of Lucas's belongings, and muttering the incantations under his breath. As dawn approached, he whispered the final words, and the doll's eyes, Lucas's eyes, slowly opened. For a moment, Anton was overwhelmed with joy, but then something in those eyes shifted. The warm, gentle gaze of Lucas was gone, replaced by something cold and unnatural. The doll began to move, but not as a human would. It was jerky, mechanical, and wrong. As Anton reached out to touch him, Lucas grinned, a twisted, sinister smile. "You brought me back," the doll rasped, "but now I'm hungry." Anton's blood ran cold. He realized too late the terrible mistake he had made. The doll lunged towards him, its hollow voice whispering, "It's time to eat." That night, Anton's shop on the hill fell silent, and the villagers never saw him again. But whispers spread of dolls that could move, of laughter heard in the dead of night, and of a warning: never bring back the dead. The bride's last question. Maya left the office later than usual, her breath visible in the crisp night air. The walk home wasn't long, but the cold crept under her jacket, making her shiver. She wrapped her arms tightly around herself and quickened her steps, eager to get home. Her route took her over a small old bridge. It was notorious for its ghost stories. But Maya had never paid much attention to local gossip. People loved to talk about haunted places, but she didn't believe in such things. Or at least she hadn't. Tonight felt different. As she crossed the bridge, an unsettling feeling washed over her, like she wasn't alone. Maya had the distinct sensation that someone was behind her, shadowing her every move. The feeling was so strong that she swore she could feel warm breath on the back of her neck. Startled, she whipped around, but the path behind her was empty. A nervous laugh escaped her lips as she turned forward again. That's when she froze. Standing directly in front of her, blocking her path, was a woman dressed in an old-fashioned wedding gown. "Do you have the time?" the woman asked, her voice soft but eerie. Maya blinked, confused. The woman's face was obscured by a veil, and her appearance was out of place. Who would be wandering around in a bridal gown at night? What?" Maya stammered, taken aback. "I'm late," the woman explained. "My groom will be waiting for me. Could you tell me the time? Maya glanced down at her watch, her fingers trembling slightly. It's 9 p.m., she said, her voice uncertain. The woman in the gown nodded. Thank you, she said, before turning and walking away, her white dress flowing behind her like a wisp of fog. Maya stood frozen for a moment, watching her vanish into the night. Once the figure disappeared, she shook her head and continued home, trying to shake the strange encounter from her mind. The next day at work, Maya casually brought up the bridge to her co-worker Drew. What's the deal with that old bridge by my place? She asked. Drew's face fell. You mean Lover's Bridge? He asked. It's been closed off for years. Maya furrowed her brow. Closed off? I walked across it last night. There was nothing blocking it. His eyes widened, and he leaned in, lowering his voice. They blocked it off after a bride hung herself there, years ago. She was running late for her wedding, and her groom thought she stood him up. Ever since, people say her ghost haunts the bridge. Carey, another co-worker, overheard and added, They say if she asks you for the time, the answer you give is the time you'll die. Maya felt her stomach drop. She stared at her watch, the memory of the eerie bride flashing in her mind. 9 p.m. That's the time she told the ghost. The beast in the woods. I've always been independent, mainly because I had to be. At 24, living on my own, I've spent most of my life without any real family support. My parents were stuck in a cycle of rehab and jail, leaving me to fend for myself, juggling 2 jobs, one at a restaurant and another washing cars. Stress was a constant companion, but one night at the restaurant, that stress boiled over. It all started when a group of rowdy teenagers decided to cause a scene. They were loud, obnoxious, and disturbing everyone around them. I'd already warned them once to quiet down, but it seemed to fall on deaf ears. Approaching their booth again, I reminded them to keep it down. One of the kids, clearly drunk, stood up, smirking as he told me to mind my own business. Before I could respond, he picked up his drink and threw it at me. Soda drenched my clothes and my patience snapped. I grabbed the kid, ready to teach him a lesson, but my boss intervened just in time. He dragged me to the back, telling me he'd never seen me this angry before. He could tell I was under a lot of stress, and suggested I take a week off. At first I refused. Time off didn't pay the bills. But he insisted. That's when my cousin Carl showed up. Carl, the spoiled outdoorsy type, invited me on a hunting trip. Normally I'd say no, but with a forced week off, I figured why not. The next day, we headed to a remote cabin in the woods. It was beautiful, far nicer than anything I could afford, and for a moment I felt like this trip might actually help me unwind. Carl, being the gun-obsessed hunter he was, wasted no time setting up for the hunt. I wasn't interested, so I grabbed one of his rifles and went for a walk, just to clear my head. As I ventured deeper into the woods, the eerie silence settled in. Then I saw it, what I thought were antlers poking out from the bushes. But when I got closer, I realized it was a deer, torn apart in the most brutal way. My stomach turned. Suddenly I heard heavy footsteps behind me. I turned and froze. Standing there was a massive, ape-like creature, with glowing red eyes, its fur matted with blood. Before I could react, it struck me, sending me flying. Dizzy and bleeding, I scrambled to escape, but the creature was relentless. Just when I thought it was over, my hand found Carl's rifle. Without hesitation, I fired. The creature howled in pain and dropped to one knee, giving me the chance to escape. I ran back to the cabin, terrified, but knowing I'd never return to those woods again.